important now. We're going to be going into the session on questions and answers. So we have a number of questions that have popped into the Q&A, which is where the questions should go. We're going to, they basically go into some different categories, calibration, other devices that may either offer a better source of respiratory monitoring, devices that may replace the particular characteristics of the pulse oximetry. So let's go to the first question that had come in regarding recommended pulse oximetry verification guidelines protocols. What is required in terms of calibration? What are alternative calibration methodologies? So I pose this question to any of our panelists.
Toby, restate the question one more time.
Yes, the question is regarding requirements for calibration of pulse oximetry equipment. What is required? What is available? What are alternative methodologies for calibrating pulse oximeters or understanding that they are working properly and accurate?
I can field that question. Currently, Fluke and BC Biomedical are among manufacturers that make pulse oximeter simulators. These are like artificial fingers. I think Sharifu mentioned that. At Arusha Technical College, we have the finger sim. I think what he was trying to mention on that regard is the finger sim maybe in some ways has some deficiencies relative to the Fluke in that it can be temperature sensitive in trying to create this simulated finger. However, that is the best tool that we have right now for field calibration of pulse oximeters. Generally, you would want to check that they are accurate to within the manufacturer's specifications, which are typically 2%. You'd want to check, for instance, at, I believe their finger sim modules are at 97%, 90%, and 80%. Whereas most important, of course, is the hypoxic levels, and that tends to be where they are least accurate.
And let me also point out that when we managed a fleet of tens of thousands of pulse oximeters used in hospitals and nursing homes throughout the US, those simulators were not available, and the ones that were unaffordable. We had 150 field service engineers and technicians, and it simply wasn't possible. So we used a very rudimentary method, which was to put it on your own finger. If you're healthy and the reading is approximately 99, 100%, that's at least an indication that the device is reading something useful. If you put it on 2 or 3 people who are healthy and you get the same results, that is another suggestion that doesn't tell you anything about the 80% patient. And while I'm mentioning the 80% patient, I'll take the opportunity to point out that the literature does have some articles that suggest that persons with dark skin pigmentation can cause errors, significant errors at the 80% level by reading false high, excessively high readings. And that's an area that perhaps is understudied, but it is something to be considered as we work with patients in many countries that have a darker skin pigmentation, because that could be an erroneous reading that leads to either a bad diagnosis or incorrect screening decision.
Another important question has come in from Bill Gentles. I believe that this could best be addressed by perhaps Adriana, related to the finger probe used for screening. If the pulse ox is used for screening, what is the next steps to clean that probe, decontaminate it? Is there disposable finger coverings that might be available? Or I know that there are publications that address this issue.
Bill and the rest, yes, actually the book does talk about the different uses, the decontamination, even the maintenance issues for all of them, for the fingerprint, for the handheld, and for the tabletop. So we just put them as guidance so that the users can read them, but eventually, of course, there are specific procedures that one wants to expand on them. But the basic cleaning and maintenance procedures and even the check are in the book. Just to give the answer quickly, no? But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Also, we have a number of questions that are related to interference, limitations of pulse oximetry, sunlight, movement, various interfering sources, carbon monoxide poisoning. Also, WHO has excellent resources related to this. There are tutorials on pulse oximetry. I don't know, Adriana, if you want to expand on that or others.
Sorry. Yes, Toby, we have a, I cannot, well, I can put the websites on the chat as I've done for the first questions that we got, where people can find more information about the use of the pulse oximeter, but actually much more has to be done, much more has to be published, and much more has to be available for all kinds and all settings. So now maybe with the use of the pulse oximeter widely for COVID and others, it would be much more available information for the use of COVID, specifically for health centers or in rural areas or in places with warm weather, high humidity, and then the roughness of the use of the pulse oximeters, depending if it is a finger tip or tabletop. There have been some studies of taking the pulse oximeters into health centers and special low resource areas. And the idea was how can we ensure that they are available in all these settings? There was initially, and this is, I'll find the source for that, and then maybe I can send it to Tom to distribute. But there was even a paper because the idea was to encourage that in every health center, as they have a blood pressure measurement and so, that they should also have a pulse oximeter. But then it was seen that it was not used. So what was the problem? The problem was that the healthcare worker didn't know how it could serve their diagnostics. The problem was that it was not available, or it was not working, or he or she didn't know how to use it, or how the best use of it. So I think there should be much more training on the possibilities of having the pulse oximeter as a first diagnostics. And the moment you do your blood pressure measurement and take your scope, use your pulse oximeter. If that were done at the very beginning, many childhood pneumonias and other things will be detected immediately in the healthcare centers before even the person, and then can triage and send the person to the patient, to the hospital or whatever other reference. No? So there is a push for that. Now we're using COVID as a way to push availability of oxygen, but also a way to push availability of pulse oximeter. So that's something that we have to promote widely in all kinds of centers, even for non-technical, doctors or nurses, but even healthcare workers can use a pulse oximeter wisely if teach so. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. As you say, the pulse oximeter is essential for diagnostic monitoring in any patient that gets oxygen. There had been some questions regarding standards and regulations, and I think it would be appropriate. We have two panelists that have put together some material on this, Yadin David and Elliot Sloan, regarding particularly regulations in the US. So I'm going to turn this over to Yadin first.
Thank you, Toby. Sharifo made a great presentation of the role of clinical engineer in the assurance of the performance of pulse oximeter. I have an old pulse oximeter here. Here is the instrument and this is the finger pulse. And it's so simple. You push a button and you get the reading. There is an error because I didn't put the pulse sensor on my finger. You can see the light shining. And if I put it on my finger, they're going to be starting a pulse reading and on the instrument, and I'm getting pulse oximetry reading. It's so small, it's so easy to carry, it's so easy to give to somebody, but yet there are some special needed, as you can see here. There are some special needed measurements and guidance to understand what does it mean when you get a product like that. And one of them is the understanding of regulation. The two major body of regulatory agency in the world right now are the CE mark in Europe and the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, in the US. The pulse oximeter has been invented by a Japanese engineer almost 45 years ago, Takao Ayowagi, I believe, if I'm pronouncing his name right. And he just passed away, unfortunately, early this month. But it became to be known as the fifth vital sign monitor. It's so, as I said, so easy to apply. So where are we going with this regulation question? The FDA does not, as Sharifo said, check the accuracy of the devices, does not test devices, period. Also, not testing pulse oximetry. What the FDA does is classifying the risk of the device to patients and users. And all the oximeters, regardless how they're using, if they're used in sports, in aviation, in nursing home, in homes, or in the hospital, are classified as a class 2 device, saying that they must be manufactured in certain quality processes, that they must have appropriate documentation, and that they are not hurting patients. There's nothing about accuracy. There's nothing about calibration. So therefore, what I would like to emphasize is that any vendor that claim that they are FDA approved are stating something that is impossible. The FDA does not approve. The FDA clear device to market, meaning allows you to sell it. It does not say it is safe. It does not say it's accurate. You have to read the instructions for use to really see what is the accuracy, and you have to test it to really verify that. As I said, they are small, easy to send, easy to deliver, easy to apply, but at the same time, they have variety of algorithm and detection and light emitting diodes that need to be maintained, clean, and calibrated. So my comment to the audience today is that you must check the pulse oximeter to validate its accuracy. When you receive it, you must maintain and service it, and you must clean it. Unfortunately, most of the pulse oximeters are tied to the patient. So if we're talking about COVID patient, that means it's in the environment that need to be cleaned afterwards between patient, and that healthcare provider need to be careful when they're handling those devices between patients. Thank you.
So let me jump in. Thank you, Yadin, and offer some other thoughts. I mean, about 2 months ago, I purchased some of these low-cost devices, and I carefully screened them on Amazon to be sure that they suggested or indicated that they were listed with the FDA and CE. One of the items that I got, there's no indication on the box or on the literature that I received that has anything related to CE or FDA. The contact one does have a CE mark on it, and I can find and I can trace CE, and at the time I could trace FDA indication at their website. Today, Contact has removed all of their FDA and CE notations from their website, and it's disappeared from all of the sales on Amazon, Alibaba, eBay, and any other sources. So, you know, I have to assume that the volume production that they're going through, they've made a strategic or business decision or liability decision to discontinue those claims. The concept of claims and claims made is important to understand with the FDA as well. The FDA bases a lot of their decisions and interventions on claims made. And medical claims, if a manufacturer says that a product is for diagnostic or therapeutic uses, typically in a hospital, they will charge more, and they are in the highest level of stringent oversight by the FDA. The FDA has two other categories. One is aviation and sports, and a third category is just called wellness. And those presumably, the buyer beware, make some decisions about the approximate accuracy and utility for their own needs. The aviation, if one's trying to decide if one might be oxygen starved and make dangerous decisions flying a plane, that has a degree of risk that is different than wellness and fitness or exercise, which also has risk, but it's within the personal use. A lot of the current products that I find on Amazon and Alibaba and other vendors now have explicit statements, not a medical device. So I assume they are making, at least for the time being, a statement to bypass regulatory intervention. So it is a serious challenge right now. The market is depleted of products, and for most of the vendors I see on the market today, they are new vendors that have not been visible before, and they only have very few comments or feedbacks. So the buyer beware. And in the chat box or the question and answer, I said that you probably have to test 100% of them coming in to make sure that whatever you receive, in fact, is functional.
I'd just like to add to what Elliot said. Our anecdotal evidence from using pulse oximeters in teaching at Arusha Technical College, we have up to 30 pulse oximeters tested with our FingerSim device. And what we generally find is in the range above 90 degrees saturation, most of them are accurate. And also most of the papers we've read have reported the same studies, that if you're looking above 90%, you're generally within a few percent of accuracy. So if you set the threshold at 90%, as was mentioned, for hypoxia, silent hypoxia, you can probably get away with using most inexpensive devices.
Comment? Toby?
Yes, Adriana.
Can I comment quickly?
Yes, sure.
I think, well, you're touching into some important points that we have it not only in pulse oximeter, but also in EKG and many other things. So we have devices, or even in masks, when we were talking about non-medical masks. So we have non-medical masks, we have non-medical pulse oximeters, we have non-medical EKGs when people are talking about measuring oxygen saturation or measuring your pulse or measuring EKG or protecting with the mask. So these are non-medical issues, non-medical articles, let's call it that way. And then there are the ones that are medical, that have been registered, that they do all the compliance, and they will have the FDA approval or the CE mark or the TGA or the Japanese authority, etc. And they went through that process. There are many others that do not go. So this is also an area of much interest of us as clinical engineers and also on regulators on saying which devices go the wellness path. And so because they said they're for wellness, they're not a medical device, they're for health, but they're the ones that are really used for diagnostic monitoring, etc. And they have stringent regulatory pathways, stringent compliance to standards, etc. So I think we really need to distinguish between those two products in many of the medical devices. And now many medical devices are becoming devices that are also sold by any others that are not really a medical device. So I think we have to make that difference and be sure to explain that to the users so that people might not be confused that they have a very good compliance with standards or compliance with testing or so if they were not classified as such. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
And very briefly, before we conclude, I just want to point out that the classic way of trying to make sure your devices are accurate is to maintain one device as your reference standard and compare other device performance against that one device. All other things being equal, if you can at least keep one device as your gold standard, it's easier to ensure the other products are working properly.
Thank you, Elliot. So we need to close up with the conclusions of the town hall now. We've covered a lot of subjects. We know about the resources and work of WHO on the clinical side, the clinical engineering side. We will be answering all of the questions that have been posted, and you'll receive the answers there. So I'm going to bring this over to Tom for final words.
Thank you, Toby. Great job. And we appreciate, I've seen, what, 20 in the Q&A section and then a good running stream in the chat section. Some complex topics. Not going to try to recap everything I've heard here today. I think one big issue we've heard over the 4 town halls so far, and we'll also emphasize it next Tuesday, is we need to fill out that inventory tool that Adriana's talked about. Before this is over, we'll put how to do that online again. As she said, she's got some data, but needs a lot more to really be able to distribute not only information, but equipment and accessories around the world through the process of how that's been working. Once again, of course, 5 webinars, including the ventilators through next Tuesday. You've seen schedules before that cause there to be perhaps more town halls after that. For now, there hasn't been volunteers coming forward, and those topics I think may be slightly of less interest to this body of people. And so we are suspending the town halls after next Tuesday. There's the possibility of one a week from today on Friday, the what's that, the 22nd, to answer a lot of these remaining questions that we've been gathering answers from the experts from all over. So in recap, there'll be the ventilators on Tuesday the 19th, and perhaps a question and answer across all 5 topics on Friday the 22nd. And we really appreciate a lot of attendance. We've averaged about 250 folks from registering for these from 60+ countries. Adriana, other comments from you in closing?
Just to thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for sending these seminars. And the idea is to collect all the input and then be able to share it with you on responses. But also we need to keep on working for COVID altogether. We would need to have some training material. We need to review standards. We need to validate products coming into the market. So we will be asking for help from all of you because we need to do this together. And thank you very much, and always thinking on the wellness of patients. Thank you all, and stay safe. Thank you.
Back to you, Toby, to close.
I'd like to thank Adriana, all the presenters, the panelists that have responded to questions, and all of you who attended the meeting today. So again, we'll be getting out the answers to the questions. I know some of them are in the chat, so we'll pull those out also and get those out to you through IFMBE CED. Thank you, everyone.
And as always, this recording will probably be out by tomorrow. Appreciate it, and bye.